Are we going to do that right now?
Are we ready?
We are ready.
Welcome to the 2024 SSUSD Measure AA Community Forum. I am Chris Hill, board member of the Ridgecrest Chamber of Commerce. This is a public service town hall being presented by the Sierra Sands Unified School District and moderated by the Ridgecrest Chamber of Commerce, the Ridgecrest Area Association of Realtors, and the Indian Wells Valley Economic Development Corporation. We thank the City of Ridgecrest for making this venue available for this important event. As we begin, I invite you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance and then a moment of silence for our country, our community, and our kids. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In addition to myself moderating this evening, I would like to introduce Scott O'Neill, Executive Director of the IWV Economic Development Corporation. The purpose of tonight's event is to share fair, impartial, and accurate information about Measure AA so voters can come to their own conclusion on how to vote. I welcome our community here and viewing online, and a special thank you to those of you who submitted questions for consideration. For those here in the audience, there are index cards available for you to write your questions for the panelists. Please have your questions submitted to the moderators by 6 p.m. Questions will be reviewed for clarity. We will try to get all the questions answered this evening. If you would like a direct response from the school district, you may include contact information on the index card or submit it to letstalk@ssusd.org/lets_talk for a response. At this time, I want to turn it over to Superintendent Dr. April Moore for an informational presentation. Dr. Moore.
Thank you, Chris, and panelists for joining me this evening. I'd like to start by giving a brief overview of the Measure AA lead up to the board's decision to put the measure on the ballot for voters to decide as we are kicking off our informational forum. These slides were presented at the July public board meeting prior to the board making a decision on whether or not to put the ballot forward. And so here we have, you may recall our Join the Conversation approach, but we did a massive poll of our community in January to see the priorities of the voters, and it started with about 20 or 30 possible priorities that the community helped us narrow down to 6 top priorities, and then we continued the conversation. And we wanted to make sure that we got it right, and so we did additional surveys, polling, and informational presentations throughout the community through March. And these were the priorities that rose to the top, these 7. Attracting and retaining highly qualified staff, ensuring school safety, ensuring all schools are prepared for earthquakes, fix or replace leaky roofs, doors, and windows, utilize opportunities for Department of Defense matching funds, replace deteriorating plumbing, electrical, heating, and cooling systems, and expand facilities to support programs in reading and literacy for the youngest learners. So in January, items 2 through 7 were prioritized, and then in our additional outreach, we added that first item based on community and public input. And so these 7 have been confirmed over time as some of the top priorities for our community. And so as such, we wanted to provide some brief information. Some of our schools are over 70 years old. It has been a while since we have built them, and we know we have built some schools, which is great. So we have some that are newer in their first decade, and we have many that are older that still need to be updated. And while the district works hard every year, we have a dedicated maintenance and operations team that continue to maintain our facilities and do more daily routine updates and repairs and cleaning. They need significant work. Why are quality schools important for our community? We know that maintaining high-quality schools attracts and retains a skilled workforce, not only in the school district, but in our entire community. Many people of working age have families and want an excellent educational opportunity for their children. Can the base help? That we know that's a big part of our community, and absolutely, the base does help. And they currently have a grant that we have been asked to apply for that would pay for 80% of building a new school, Vuig Elementary School, as we're proposing it as a K-8 STEM academy, but that is being offered to us with the Department of Defense, federal funds paying 80%. What would be required is a district match of 20%, which is $20 million. And so then we shared the very specific ballot language to be as clear as possible. I'm not going to read it this evening, but we do have that specific language, and you'll see in there those priorities that I read a moment ago that our community confirmed, and that was very important to us to reference in the ballot language, the 75-word limit that we have for the ballot, as well as the very specific and longer full resolution text. We also learned from our community that accountability is very important. In talking with a number of individuals related to the last bond measure and where we might go with our priorities, we knew that it needed to be very clear, unambiguous language with strict accountability. And so you'll see in here an annual independent performance audit, annual independent financial audit, very strict language that the bonds may only be used for the purposes outlined in the resolution, annual reports, and then finally a citizens oversight committee to review and report on the expenditures annually. And then the projects themselves, very specific language, unambiguous, and I'll go straight to that list. And these are the lists. So the first items on the bond project list are those exact community priorities, minus attract and retain a skilled workforce, because the bond is for facilities, it's not for staffing. So it's not appropriate to list in the bond project. We do believe having updated facilities will help us attract and retain that quality workforce, but these are the other 6 priorities you'll see here verbatim. And then we have Tier 1 and Tier 2. So Tier 1, with the $42 million bond that we're putting forward for voters to consider, Tier 1 is what we would expect to spend those funds on. Rebuilding and reconstructing Vuig Elementary School, which would be leveraging the Department of Defense grant to pay 80% and having the district pay the 20% required match. Update, upgrade, and renovate and repair Pierce Elementary School, which has not been modernized for some time. It had some basic infrastructure, but still has old facilities with significant needs. Update, upgrade, and renovate classrooms and labs for the 21st century. So this is district-wide. This would be, any schools would be eligible for having these updates. And then certainly updating, upgrading, and renovating and repairing Inyo Kern Elementary School. And many of you have seen a recent video that we put out showing an example of Inyo Kern, knowing that we also have Vuig and Pierce that have these significant needs. Now, in case we're able to stretch those dollars, we're still working with the Department of Defense to see how creative we can be. Maybe Pierce can be included in their grant funds. If we stretch those dollars and have additional funding, we wanted unambiguous language. What would that be used for? And that's where Tier 2 comes in. And we have a number of items that could be included should the dollars stretch, but these are not promises. It's more so that we can make sure that we're effectively using bond funding, and should it stretch beyond Tier 1, this is what we would consider spending that money on. And in anticipation of a tax measure, we did our due diligence in working with the Kern Taxpayers Association in structuring the bond, the resolution, and the tax rate statement in such a way that it was as responsible to our local taxpayers as possible, so much so that before the board even determined to put the ballot on the measure, the Kern Taxpayers Association had voted to endorse the bond measure because of our partnership with them. And so that was the informational slides that we provided to the board prior to their vote in approving the measure to be on the ballot for the community to consider. Would this be an appropriate time to introduce our folks? Scott, okay.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Now I'd like to introduce the subject matter experts we have on hand for this evening. They are Stacy Toledo, Bond Counsel for the district, Jonathan Edwards, Financial Advisor for the district, and Jeff Moore, the Facilities Director. Thank you all for being here tonight, and we welcome our panelists. Please introduce yourselves and share your role.
My name is Sylvia Payanis. I am a parent of 2 young children in the district, and I'm also a school employee.
My name is Bill Ferris. I am currently a school board member, and this year I'm also the president of our school board. I also am a grandparent of 5 students in the district and great-grandparent of 2. As a board member, my responsibility and my duty in this event that we're dealing with right now kind of begins with the fact that the board is responsible to provide a vision, a mission, and through policy, oversee the operations of the district. So when the administration brought, as you saw, the presentation to the board, the consideration was, do we present this as an opportunity to our community to support through a bond measure funding this specific presentation? The reason that's important is because in order to fund our local school district, we are provided state funding for our operations primarily. To accomplish that, we have opportunity through state facilities funding and federal facilities funding to provide extra facilities, and those require a match. So we believe the best opportunity for the community is to provide those match funds through a bond measure so that it does not deplete the operational budget that we are working with day to day. One of the key factors that was shared earlier was the issue of retention of employees. So if we're going to operate and retain employees and be able to compensate at a level that is competitive, we need to make sure that the additional funding we get is from another source rather than an operational source. So that's why the board felt it was important to bring this to the community to make that decision so we can optimize our funding.
I'm Eileen Poole.
There it is.
There you go.
I'm Eileen Poole. I teach at Burroughs Drama and English, and I'm in my 5th year as president of the Desert Area Teachers Association.
Thank you, panelists. The event this evening is being live streamed to the public, so it's also being recorded. So it can be viewed later via the City of Ridgecrest YouTube channel. Again, our goal in moderating this forum is to share fair, impartial, accurate information about Measure AA so voters can come to their own conclusion about how to vote. In order to address as many questions as possible, a panelist will have 2 minutes for each response to a question. The timer on the wall will also be running as a reference for you. It will sound an alarm when your time is up. So when you hear the alarm, please wrap up your comments. So, okay, let's jump into the first question. Why does the school district need a bond when they already get funding from the county, the state, and the lottery?
I think because of what Bill said earlier, we have money that we do get from the state. However, all of that is put into categories. We can't spend it all however we want. So getting this extra money for facilities would help to improve our facilities here in Sierra Sands.
If I could elaborate on that just a little. So the state does allocate money on a per pupil expenditure based on attendance. That money designed by the state is specifically designated for operational expenses. They do not expect a local district to fund the facilities through that revenue stream. There's a separate facilities fund that a district can qualify for. But in that qualification, you have to demonstrate need either through deterioration, through unhoused students, or emergency. And then they require a match. So in order to access those funds, we have to provide a match. We believe that the best way to do that without impacting the operational fund is to offer the opportunity to our community to pass a bond so that we can then access those both federal and state funds and provide our facilities, both repairs and replacement, and keep us operationally efficient, keep our educational program strong by not diminishing the revenue available for that, and to keep us competitive with our personnel. Again, because otherwise, if you don't have that outside fund, you've got to come with it internally.
I have a follow-up.
Sure.
So a lot of people think that they passed the lottery a number of years ago to help fund our schools. And they think that the lottery funding is adequate to handle these kind of situations. What do you see?
So it's an interesting concept, and for those of you who were available when the lottery first came into being, it was sold very specifically to help public schools, and it has been a help. But it's important to put it into perspective. So, for instance, for the 24-25 school year, we received two different portions of lottery funds. One was $911,000. And the other one was about $391,000 for that year. The one portion has to be spent on instructional materials, and the other we happen to spend on electrical costs. So what's important to have is the perspective of, so you're talking about, what, $1.3 million, and our annual budget is about $74 million. So in relationship, it's a nice little pat on the back, but it really isn't anything significant to allow you to address all the needs of public education. Thank you.
Any other comment? Thank you.
If Measure AA passes, what specific projects will be prioritized? And I know that the informational slides did touch on this a little bit, but if we could talk a little bit more in detail about the specific prioritization of what was on that list, a little bit in detail.
I will take that. First of all, before I go, I want to thank you, the organizations that are making this opportunity available and the moderators for working with us this evening. It's important work. So I believe school safety is one of the most significant priorities. And then from there, we have a couple of real critical issues in that we do have to match both the state and federal available funds. So the new school at VWIG, matching that portion of that project is critical. And again, that's a real boon for this particular community because it's an opportunity not everyone has. But that 4-to-1 match is pretty powerful. And then also the rehab for the peer school would be very high on the priority. And then the rest would be for other projects that would be, might also qualify for state funding. And those percentages are different depending on the type of project they are. So it expands our funds. But again, the prioritization really had to do with safety first, leaky roofs and windows, and replacing deteriorating plumbing and electrical and heating and cooling systems, that kind of thing.
Thank you. Any additional comments?
If Measure AA gets passed, will I, a homeowner, see a property tax increase for the next 30 years?
Ladies, want to take that? You can do it. So yeah, the answer is absolutely yes. And it's, the actual rate is, but $6 a hundred, is that right? $6
per 100,000.
Yeah, $6 for 100,000 assessment. And so depending on,
60 per 100.
I'm sorry.
6 per 100.
See, that's why I was looking at you guys. Thanks a lot. So you knew the answer, right? So, which in an assessed valuation, that is what your taxed assessment is, not what your sale value of your home is. So the average home in Ridgecrest is about $300,000 assessed value. So it would be about $150 a year for that 30-year, about $15 a month.
So how would a person find what their assessed value of their tax is? Just call the county tax assessor?
Or you can look on your tax bill, which you recently received.
Great.
All right. As stated on the school district website, as also referenced in the informational slides earlier, there will be a citizens oversight committee to ensure financial accountability. How do people get involved?
I'll take this one. It's a great question, and we actually had an informational session recently to start gathering insight and input. And that open window is still ongoing, and we have Jonathan, our financial advisor, who was here helping to lead that informational workshop recently. So Jonathan, I don't know if you want to share a little bit more, but ultimately it's just reach out to our office. Kim Kramer is collecting that interest list. There are qualifications, and there's a few folks that we need to have on the committee, but it's not a limit, it's a minimum. And so we're looking to grow that community oversight and citizens oversight committee. And the plan is to bring that list to the board for future action. When we're certifying the bond vote is when we're anticipating also certifying the citizens oversight committee. So we are currently recruiting for that. But I want to give a moment to Jonathan, who's on virtually with us. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that response, Jonathan?
I think that was a very good summary, April. No, I think just as you mentioned, please contact Kim Kramer at the district. She is set up to receive your information and find out what some of the required minimum committee representatives are. But as April mentioned, the district is very much welcoming volunteers, and there is no cap on the number of folks who can participate. Thank you.
I have a follow-up. So it says fiscal accountability. What are the other responsibilities for this committee? Do they look at your priorities and make sure they're being true to your priorities also?
So the committee's primary responsibility, to boil it down, is to make sure that the bond funds are spent on the authorized projects and nothing else. And also the committee reports to the community at least once a year and has the opportunity, is actually required to, review 2 separate audits that occur with regard to the bond measure. One will be a financial audit of bond proceeds, and the second will be a performance audit Again, looking at the expenditures that were made and how those relate to authorised projects. So the committee is involved in reviewing that documentation as well, pursuant to coming up to its annual report to the community.
Great, thank you. Question number 5. What happens if Measure AA does not pass?
I want to respond to that. It's not, as far as, it's not going to be great, right? Because then that means, from my vantage point, what I know is that means the school, the district will be dipping into general funds. And general funds is where we get, salaries for employees. So for me, that's a big deal. That's the part that I know. It will be, if without that money, they'll be going into general funds, which leaves that funding for salaries a little bit lower.
If I could expound on that just a little, it is important to understand the study that was done and the determination what the need is. So I think we have to conclude that the need is there. The work will have to be done. So one could say, well, if it doesn't pass, we just won't do the work. That's not really an option. We must do the work. We have facilities that are failing. We have a survey that has made an assessment and told us that one of the facilities is in such poor shape, it will cost us more to operate it than it will to replace it. Hence, a new build. So this has to happen as far as repair and replacement. So then the question, as Eileen has so aptly put, means where does it come from? So if we don't have an alternate stream, we have to go to the general fund. And remember, I told you by design, the allocation from the state for the general fund is specifically made to operate your daily operations, to pay your staff, to maintain minor repairs, and keep things operational. If you don't get the alternate revenue source, then indeed, those repairs, those replacements have to come from your general fund, which means then you don't have the opportunity to offer the robust educational program that you need to. You don't have the ability to offer your personnel the compensation packages they well deserve, and you end up losing folks because other districts do pass bonds and do fund their facilities. So.
Can I add on? Can I add on to that? Because I fear that I was sounding like I just want more money. But one of the first thing Dr. Moore was talking about earlier that people had agreed on for goals is to retain staff, right? Attract and retain. And we're not going to be able to do that for any of us, right? Especially not just teachers, right? There's all kinds of staff. And some of us know that there are students who, sorry, I'm going off topic here. We just know that that is one of the primary ways of getting the staff that we want in all aspects of the school district. And so when we have that money to go towards that, it just helps get more people here and to stay here, as you pointed out, that they're going to stay in our community. And when you can get not just teachers, but all staff in there and longer, they have more buy-in, right? And that serves the students well. So if we can keep our hands off the general fund and save that for the other things, I think it's just very helpful for everyone.
Okay, now we're ready to take some questions from the audience, if they have it.
We can alternate. I'll go ahead and start. Straught? Could you please give the amount of property tax per parcel calculated at $100,000? Oh, valued. Okay, let me restart. Could you please give the amount of property tax per parcel valued at $100,000? And then for context, it says, I need to know if I calculated the amount of additional property tax per year. Please explain again when Tier 2 funding applies and how it applies to the bond measure. So I guess that's a two-part question.
I'll start, and then Jonathan add or clarify. So appreciate the opportunity to clarify that it is $60 per $100,000 of assessed value. And so the example that Mr. Ferris gave earlier was our average median home price, but again, it's whatever your home is valued at, assessed at, not market value. It's $60 per 100,000. And the second part of that question,
It focused on when Tier 2 funding applies.
so the total bond is not changing. It's $42 million. We will not come back and charge more for Tier 2. Tier 2 is only because we don't know how far we'll be able to stretch the $42 million. There are certain other matching funds that we're trying to tap into at the state and federal level that 42 might become more money. Like, we know that the Department of Defense 80 million is already on the table, right? So we have 42 million on the table potentially on our ballot measure that can then activate 80 million from the Department of Defense at least. There may be more that we're trying to negotiate, and an unknown amount from the state. So it wouldn't be more local property taxes at all if we go into Tier 2. It's a matter of, are we leveraging other grants and resources that this will help us unlock, that we can stretch those dollars further, but we would not be coming back for anything other than the 42 million. And so that's kind of the base plan, but Jonathan, any other technical response that you want to add or clarify?
No, that's exactly correct. The amount of authorization that the school district is seeking is $42 million, and that cannot be, should that be approved, the school district would not have the authority to exceed that $42 million.
Thank you.
Okay. How does the bond support students?
Well, I'll take that one. I feel that the bond will support the students by giving them the opportunity to have safe schools. They're taken care of with heating and air conditioning, nice windows in there so that they're not getting too cold or too hot. And, being able to provide structurally safe and sound schools so that they have the opportunity to not worry about them being safe. They are there just to learn.
Adding to that, if I may, I think Sylvia spoke specifically to the facilities improvement. Again, the bond does free up our general fund to be focused on what it's supposed to be focused on. So children will be served by having a robust educational opportunity and by staff who are well compensated and who are happy in their work because they're better compensated and are here with a longer term. So in almost every way, our students are served by the bond.
All right, this next question is similar to that previous one, but this one focuses on teachers, staff, and community. It says, how would the facility updates benefit teachers, staff, and community?
Well, like Eileen had spoke about before, with the money, if we don't pass the bond, it will then come from general fund, which will take away money for salaries. However, if we do pass it, then we don't have to dip into there. It will bring our schools up to par. It will be better. It will attract more people here to better schooling for their students. I know when I looked at moving away, the first thing that I looked at was schools. That was years ago, but, you know, that's my first priority, having young kids, is schooling. So having good schools here will attract people here, bring up property values, so it will benefit students, staff, and community having passing this bond.
Yeah, and I think the question addressed the new facilities as well. Am I
It
correct?
did say facility updates.
Yeah, so pretty much to say what Sylvia said, if we have students who are safer, and then if we, you know, redistributing students when, and I don't know if this is directly addressing our change in campuses or facilities? No.
I mean-
It's just on this.
We're using the same facilities for the reorganization, I think she's,
Right.
what she's referring to.
It's on my mind at all times.
But yes, as we want to use the full capacity and balance our families across the community, we need to have equitable facilities for them to learn in.
Yeah, which seems like just a better opportunity for students to hear the teachers and, you know, the places, the facilities need updating and the kids are aware. And I think also just that idea that we improve something, it always makes you feel better and that you're valued, right? And so if we can upgrade these facilities and the kids recognize that, I think there's just, without even them realizing it, right, that we have this idea that education and schooling matters. And so I think that goes hand in hand with the staff and with students, and we understand the importance of schooling.
And I'll just add, we were reviewing some recent research that improved facilities actually improve test scores 7 to 14%. So there's empirical research that backs up the statements and the qualitative opinions that are being shared or perspectives that are being shared. There's a lot of background to the fact that that actually does make a difference for students, which is, of course, why we exist.
Thank you.
Okay, the next question is James Monroe Middle School closed, or is it closing? And please explain why.
It is closing as of next year. It needs to close because that facility is falling apart. I go to many of the sites as the president for classified staff, and going in there and seeing the way that it looks, leaky roofs, you know, it's not sewer. We had sewage issues last year, and they had to bring in porta potties for the kids and staff, and that wasn't fun to have to deal with. And it's just one issue after another issue, and it will, like Bill said, it will cost more money to maintain it to stay open than to build somewhere else. So I think, yeah, it definitely needs to be closed down.
And if I might add, it's important to understand that that was not a conclusion that was come to lightly and just through a walkthrough. We did an extensive survey of all our facilities. And I think the number that came out was what, 97% index, which meant it has about 3% of its life left. So you go backwards when you try and maintain a facility like that. It needs to be done.
Is it fair to say that those maintenance costs would come out of the general fund?
Exactly. So they do come out of the general fund. Currently, what we did last year to mitigate the sewage issue came from our general fund. So if you don't take the bigger step, again, your standard operational expenses will be diminished.
Right. This may have already been answered, but feel free to reiterate. The question is, if one does not have children, how does the community benefit from this bond measure?
Well, I mean, you just gave that answer, right? It's a community. And so regardless of what your family looks like, we are here in a community that has strong schools that people want to come to, is a stronger community. I think and we are so small that I think, it's much easier for us to see the importance of schools in a town like this, where we're so much more connected to people here. So whether or not you have students currently in the schools, that's part of what makes people want to come here and buy housing here and stay here. And so we're a community, and we want the best for our community.
If I might add to that, because this is actually one of my favorite soapboxes, and that is this.
You have 2 minutes.
Our founding fathers understood that public education was critical to the success of our society and our government. We have to have educated young people so that we have a strong future. A strong educational program offers that to kids. It protects our future, and then you can get into the real time where it talks about your community stronger because of that, your property values go up because of that. So there's some instant return there as well, but long term, it is critical that we have public education for our future.
Thank you.
Next question. Was Gateway Elementary School the most recent SSUSD school to be funded via bonds?
So it's an interesting little bit of a turn. So SSUSD did fund the Gateway School primarily through the redevelopment agency. And it was so it was a little convoluted, but the previous bonds were really used more for rehab than the construction of the new school. It was done with a combination of state funds and redevelopment contributions. I believe that's fairly accurate in concept. We have a member of the audience was here at the time, Mr. Auld. Am I relatively accurate on that response, sir? He's shaking his head yes. So.
Yes, and that bond was passed in 2006, so the school district has not had a bond since 2006.
And the redevelopment funds are no longer available.
Correct. They were a pass-through from the redevelopment agency to the district, and they were specifically earmarked for that and only that.
All right, and this appears to be the last audience-submitted question. Again, we have touched on this, but it looks like they're looking for a little bit more detail possibly. How do we prevent a blank check? Will there be any fiscal accountability provisions to protect taxpayers?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the neat things about having a bond is that we actually have, it's a very strict, the accountability, right? We can see it there. Everything has to be checked and watched, and to me, this is like the ideal way to go about it. So I don't see any way you could not do this, right? We have to be held accountable. There has to be this. It's all up there in yellow, right? Yes. So yeah, this is, it's pretty clear because it's a bond, all these things have to be followed. So that's how you know, because it has to be.
And I'll just specify, I don't know if I mentioned it earlier in the presentation, this language is verbatim from the resolution. So the full text of the resolution, of course, is in the ballot measure information that goes out to voters. It's on our website. But this is verbatim pulled out from that language, just to clarify for this evening.
Thank you. Were there any additional comments on that question? Okay.
Okay, I think that was the last question. So thank you, panelists, and thank you all who have joined us here and have viewed online. We hope this has been an informative session and helpful in helping you determine how you want to vote. Just a reminder, if your question was not answered, please submit it to Let's Talk at ssusd.org/let's_talk. Thank you. And thank you, Chris, for co-moderating this event with me. Thank you to our hosts, Sierra Sands Unified School District, our panelists, our subject matter experts that are present, the Ridgecrest Chamber of Commerce, the Ridgecrest Area Association of Realtors, and the Indian Wells Valley Economic Development Corporation. And a final thanks to the City of Ridgecrest for accommodating this forum by allowing us to use the council chambers and their audiovisual system. This concludes the Measure AA Community Forum. Don't forget to vote. Thank you and good night.
November 5th or vote early.